Welcome to the Pot of Inquiry. My guest today is Lara Heimann. Lara is a physical therapist who started a great program in yoga called LYT Yoga. In today's conversation, we discuss how everyone can get involved with yoga and how important it is for maximizing health and should become part of everyone's biohacking routine, in my opinion. I think you'll learn a lot about yoga. I knew nothing about yoga really before talking to her in this conversation, and I learned so much that I'm actually motivated to go ahead and try starting this program for myself. So I think you'll find this conversation very interesting and maybe very motivating. So please enjoy my guest, Lara Heimann.
Welcome to the Pot of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours. Get down in the cave and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
Welcome to the Pot of Inquiry, everyone. I'm with Lara Heimann, who is the founder of LYT Yoga. Did I get that correct, Lara?
You did.
All right, very good. Well, we're going to talk about something that I know very little about, and I'm hoping that by the end of our conversation, I'll know more and maybe be even a little bit more motivated to start picking this up a little bit. So you've got a background in physical therapy. So why don't you tell us, your background in physical therapy and how you made these inroads into yoga and what you're doing now?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Stephen. I've always been really into movement. I've loved it. I knew from a young age how much it impacted my life, my mood. If you've ever been injured, you tend to be grumpier, right? Because
Sure.
It's not just the injury and the pain, but it's the lack of ability of moving the body. And movement is something that nourishes everything. So I knew that. I even wrote my college essay about it, or college, getting into my college. And then I became a physical therapist because I wanted to have an active profession. And then I wanted to help people move better, heal from injury. And I started practicing yoga because it was offered. Actually, I didn't know any. This was back in 1995. All I had pictured yoga to be was like sitting around meditating or stretching, just like many people probably think of it.
Right.
But it didn't have the popularity at all what it's had since, say, 2000s. And I took a class that was offered after a runners club meeting, and I had expectations, and the expectations were kind of shattered. Like it was moving, it was powerful, it was putting me in different positions that were challenging my body, and I just loved it. I also had dance as a background, so it kind of tapped into that dance-like moving in different planes to a degree, and moving different joints, not the kind of repetitive stuff like running was. So I just fell in love with it and started studying, and whatever I loved, I taught. I'd also been a fitness instructor. I taught spinning and step classes and aerobics. And so this was kind of a natural transition. But for a while, I was kind of like PT, physical therapist by day, and yoga teacher by night. I put them in separate lanes because many were just following yoga as not as a dogma, but as a practice that, had to me kind of was put in a box a little bit. And I was just following it in that way. When I went to get my postgraduate certification, specialization in neurological rehab, that's when I started thinking of ways that the yoga could be enhanced.
Okay.
I thought some missing pieces. One of the missing pieces was that people would come into a yoga practice and they're coming in with their existing habits, their existing postural habits, movement habits. And while moving in yoga was helping and feeling great, it was potentially just exacerbating those habits because that's how we function. What we know is what we do.
Right.
Our brain is like, oh, you hold yourself like this, you're going to hold yourself like this in other ways too. So it wasn't retraining better movement, better postural habits, better breathing habits, even if there was some instruction to it. So with my neurological rehab clients, I was doing a lot of things on the floor, revisiting developmental stages of life that we go through that helps us i- activate these very important muscles that support our spine, our pelvis, and our shoulder girdle. We call them our core or postural muscles. And those are what enable us to eventually get up off the floor and become bipedal. And when we get back on the ground, we can retrain some of those muscles that have become a little bit more dormant.
Okay.
They become more dormant because of the way our lives are. We're sitting a
Right.
lot more. We don't move in the various ways we did when we were children. And so when I was seeing by doing this work with neurologically impaired clients how much they were improving and they had this deficit to begin with, I started to surmise like, well, if I apply these same principles and practices to my yoga movement, I'm going to make changes too. And so I started doing that. And indeed, I saw like a huge shift in my own practice, my own awareness of the movement, which is ultimately what yoga is about, is right, raising consciousness. And then I started just formulating a method based on that. And people have really enjoyed it and really loved it because at the end of the day, it's different than other forms of yoga and other forms of exercise for the most part, I would say, because we're educating people about themselves,
Okay.
about biomechanics, about the nervous system,
Right.
about, their, the muscles. Most of us didn't go to PT school. We didn't learn anything. People don't even know that the scapula is a huge part of the shoulder girdle. So teaching that to people is very empowering. So it's enhancing their movement experience and it's also enhancing their lives because they're not just going and moving for that session and then going about their day. They're taking those lessons that they've integrated because it's both experiential and educational at the same time, and then applying it into an everyday life situation.
So let me get a better understanding of what you're doing with some of these neurological impaired patients, because I think maybe if there's the ability for you to help them, then you could just help pretty much anybody. So give me an example of one of the impairments that was a frequent situation that you started adopting these techniques to, because I
Yeah.
think that'd be great to help me understand it a little bit.
Sure. Well, a great example is primarily working with stroke patients. I also work
Okay.
with brain injured, traumatic brain injured, but stroke patients who have a motor deficit. It's often on one side. It's called
Right.
hemiplegia.
Mm-hmm.
And that one side, typically, if you went to PT, and certainly now, unfortunately, with the way the insurance model is limiting how much time a physical therapist could have with a client, they would say, okay, that arm is just not working. Let's put it in a sling
Right.
so that it doesn't get in the way and that subluxation doesn't get worse. And then we'll put that foot in some kind of big brace
Right.
and get you like a big quadruped cane so you can learn to kind of swing the leg around.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you teach compensation versus rewiring. What we would do as neurologically, it's called neurological developmental training. We would get them on the floor and put weight on their impaired hand
Okay.
because weight bearing through that limb, we have ground reaction force that's always
Right.
prevalent. It's there to balance out gravitational forces. And when we press the weight into whatever's on the floor, the response from the floor is to bring that energy back up. And in doing that, and then putting the hands around the shoulder girdle, you're starting to stimulate some motor activity in these injured areas. And the muscles aren't injured, the brain is injured, right?
Right.
Brain directing those muscles. So we're trying to get a different area of the brain to take over that, area that was impacted.
Right.
And so then we'd in fact put the unaffected side, we put that in a sling. So their brain has to focus the direction, the focus, the feedback from the ground, the feedback from our hands is helping to retrain the perception of that arm that they've
Okay.
also lost, the proprioception, the ability to know where it is in space,
Right.
and also the activation of the muscles that support the bones. And then we start getting them doing activities. And we do this on the foot as well. So we'd have
Right.
somebody who has a hemiplegic foot, they put their non affected foot up on a stool. So they're bearing weight on that side. We'd give them some feedback into their hip and into their quadricep to get that sensation so the brain can start paying attention to that side and rewiring more motor activity to that area. And then we start doing it in the ways we revisit the ways we were as kids. Quadruped, you're on all fours,
Right.
you have both hands down. Then we start crawling. We do things like half kneel, where you have that affected side, the foot is forward, and the non-affected side is down, and then you switch it off. So one side has to support, and the other side is getting support as well. But the floor is like the original, I call it the original prop. Like we use props in yoga. The floor, because it gives us energy and
Okay.
it gives us feedback. So
Right.
we do a lot of things on the floor, and then we just increase the challenge as the person is able to. And so the person that I was working with, actually, that kind of I had that light bulb moment. I was working with a man who was 47, had had a hemorrhagic stroke, which is
Hmm.
really hard. Many don't survive hemorrhagic strokes. But usually function can come back a little bit more if they survive. But he came in, he had had a stroke at 47. I saw him at 52 years old. So over 4 years after the stroke, he fell and it broke his femur. And he had been in a wheelchair. So he was just transitioning out of the wheelchair and fell and broke the femur. So I was assigned to him because of my neurological background. And I started doing all this stuff with him with his, broken leg. And his wife was like, he's walking better than he ever had before.
Right.
What are you doing with him? And I was like, I'm just we call it forced use. I'm putting the demand on the affected side so it has a chance to be stimulated and to improve. So I take that idea and it's like, well, we have a lot of things that aren't stimulated in our daily life. Our shoulder girdle. Most
Right.
people aren't on their hands. They aren't stimulating their shoulder girdle. We do one arm things on the floor where we're stimulating that one side. We have one side that's stronger than the other. So taking those principles of how we can force the use to create more balance in the body
Right.
is ultimately our goal.
Now, how long typically, and I know there's a vast range depending on from patient to patient, but how long does it take you to go through one of these treatment sessions? And then how long does it take, or how many treatment sessions before you start to see any benefit? What's the latency, I guess?
Yeah, well, there's some other factors like so the earlier we get in there, the better
Right.
because it's just but the gentleman I was talking about was 4 years post stroke. So
Right.
even then, getting in now, I worked with him for I would say a solid 2 years. I started going to his house and doing house visits, and I worked with him 2 to 3 times a week. And after 2 years, he was walking with a just a straight cane, and he had been in a wheelchair.
Wow.
So he had some factors on his side. He was younger.
Hmm.
I worked with him more frequently. His wife would work with him on the things that I trained her to work with, that she felt comfortable doing with him. So the frequency, the dosage is really important because
Right.
that's how we rewire the brain is we've got to
Right.
just keep the repetition, the repetition, the repetition. So it does depend on that. But if I can get somebody and working with them, 2 to 3 times a week, an hour each, and they're also doing some kind of supplemental stuff on the side, it
Hmm.
could be 6 months to a year, and you can see some big changes in overall function, gross function.
So, well, I think the stroke patient would have a better understanding that there would be a fair amount of latency involved in trying to get, motor function back. But in other situations, do you find that people are a little bit discouraged if they don't see an immediate effect, or,
Yes.
because it's really hard in all things in patient care. It's very hard if there's not some type of metric for people to understand that they are making progression, and I guess that's just human nature.
I always try and reframe it because it's human nature, but we're also conditioned to like quick fixes, quick
Right.
answers, go get a drug, go do that. Like if you're, lose weight in 6 weeks. It's this mentality. And then we have such a quick pace. I can find anything out in just typing a couple things in. But if we remember 30 years ago, we'd have to go to a big old encyclopedia. There was more
Right.
energy and more time.
Right.
So I like to reframe it like this is a practice for life. Like, aren't we, this is called the pod of inquiry. And like an inquiring mind is one that's always like every time I practice, even though I have a very strong practice, I'm very capable, I'm always examining things like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm paying attention. So I'm not looking at like, well, am I doing better than I was a year ago? Am I able to do this more? I'm just thinking about in this moment, am I balanced? Am I in this spectrum of balance? Do I feel strength? Do I feel mobility? Do I have more energy? Those are the kind of intangibles that don't necessarily have a metric. I mean, we certainly can get mobility metrics in PT, but
Right.
I think I like to put them more in terms of function. Like, how is your like? So if somebody says to me, "Oh, how long before I'm able to do this pose?" And I'm like, I have no idea. But every step that you're taking on the pathway there is a success, like getting you there. So
Right.
let's pay attention to, it is such a, it's the old adage, and it might get a little old, but it is much more about the path. The journey is what's important, and
Right.
that's our life. It's just like hygiene.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor. I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called STEM Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. STEM Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. STEM Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating STEM Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that STEM Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of STEM Regen. Hey Spelunkers, we're thrilled to kick off Season 6 with a fresh new look and the most exciting content we've ever delivered. This season, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of human optimization and understanding. But wait, there's more. We're giving back to our loyal listeners with an exclusive giveaway each and every episode of Season 6. That's right, prizes are waiting just for you. So how can you join in on this fun? Well, it's simple. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and here's the magic touch. Comment, "Let's Spelunk" on any of our Season 6 YouTube videos to enter. Of course, please add anything else you'd like to your review. Don't miss your chance to explore, learn, and win with the Pod of Inquiry. Let's spelunk into the wonders of Season 6 together.
We never say like, oh, when are we going to get the hair here? When are we going to get the cleanest we're going to get? We just do it every day. We take
Right.
care of ourselves.
Right.
And that's what we're doing is it's like our physical and our nervous system hygiene. And the goal is to be consistent.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, but even that, and I, I'm playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here because,
Yeah.
coming from a biohacking perspective and optimization of function and that, I don't think I personally need as many metrics as maybe somebody who is not in that camp with that perspective. But anytime I see something like if it's a biomarker in your blood tests or whatever, it just gives me a little bit more impetus to say, all right, I am
Yeah.
on the right path, and I got to keep going down that path. And I guess it's that way for everybody. I mean, that's how we shape ourselves based on the reactions to what we do in many, many ways. And if somebody doesn't see something right away, they may give up on it just maybe, milliseconds before they would start to see a tangible benefit from them doing what they're doing. So that's why I was asking you that.
Yeah, and I think for anyone who is going to maybe try out this or try out something else, like give yourself at least 6 weeks of
Right.
consistency. Because like you said, that one time isn't going to be enough. You might get frustrated after 5 times, but just know that. And I always say, gosh, isn't frustration actually good? It means that you're being challenged. And here's the thing, talk about biohacking. The brain is only going to respond to challenge. It's only going to respond to novelty in the way that we want it to really, though it really lights up when we're doing something that is challenging and different.
Right.
If we do the same thing over and over again, yeah, we might be benefiting our heart, our cardiovascular. That's all great. But if you want to change like all the different systems in your body, and to your point, I think it's great to, I've had people say, "Oh my gosh, my sleep's never been better.
Right.
My resting heart rate is lower, but I'm not doing as much endurance training as I'm doing." Well, that's because what we do is we're training your body to be more efficient as well. So my resting heart rate is 46. I don't run marathons anymore. I don't do anything but my own practice, but it's as low as it was then. Um, I mean, are there other confounding variables? Possibly, but I would say it's probably because I'm using my core, I'm using my breath, and I'm holding myself in a very energy efficient way so that I don't put more demand on my heart in ways it doesn't need. So it can beat slower.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that the other question I would have is, so when you're taking somebody who is not in top shape like you are and has your background and everything, and you're taking somebody that's been a little bit more sedentary, and when you start them on weight training or these other things, you want to make sure that you don't have them try to lift too much weight, not only from a frustration standpoint, but also from a musculoskeletal standpoint, because the next day they have so much lactic acid buildup that they don't want to even walk. So your program probably takes that approach, I would think, with the neurologically impaired patient even more than maybe just what you would regularly expect.
Yeah, and truthfully, I don't have many neurologically impaired patients anymore. I'm, primarily teaching able-bodied people. But
Right.
either way, I mean, I taught a workshop the other day on strength training, and 20 minutes we spent on form. Like form is so important because
Hmm.
need to have good biomechanics to support any extra load that you're adding. That doesn't mean you're not going to have, like you said, some lactic acid response to that, but you're going to feel more balanced overall because you put form over like load.
Right.
You need to have the form first and then the load. So again, teaching people how to move well includes like how to move well in all situations. And that's again very powerful because then you take that and you're able to apply it in life.
But in weight training, load is your metric.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will um, give up on the focus of the technique just in order to get more weight or more reps up so that they have that metric, and they're actually doing themselves probably harm rather than benefit.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk a lot about that. Weightlifting in general or adding any kind of load. If it's all about like how much you're lifting and form is you're going to do whatever you want. Some people can get away with that for a while, but generally speaking, it's what I'm trying to do is teach people and in my own practice be consistent as much as possible. And that consistency is whether I'm adding load whether I'm just lifting, clothes to put up in some kind of high shelf. It's like the consistency is there and then the brain mapping is there. So
Okay.
you're not going to like just leave your movement practice behind. It's integrated into your life. And so to me, those are such that's a much more meaningful, but again, maybe esoteric goal, which is like, how consistent can I be? And that's that, again, that kind of consistently having that beginner's mind almost.
Right. So tell us about what your practice is now, and I'm not asking this from the standpoint that the non-yoga person like me should try to emulate what you're doing, but it would be great for me to understand kind of what you do, because you always want to look at the experts and model after them. Like, hey, how are you going about this? Tell us about it. And that may not fit for you
Yeah.
personally, but at least it gives you some ideation about what you may be ultimately dreaming to achieve.
Well, my practice is mostly what I've created, which is the LYT yoga method. And for anybody who's like you, like a little maybe skeptical about yoga, I just had a retreat and I had the most men I've ever had on a retreat, which was exciting. It was 10 men. And it was like, oh my gosh, and they love it. And the reason is because, what I practice is a combination of it's bringing yoga together with functional training, strength training, core integrative training. And with that, we add elements of plyometrics in there. I mean, there's all different levels. So if somebody's entering and they haven't been moving much, of course, they're not going to go to that level. But that's what I practice
Okay.
because I looked at when I started creating this, I thought, I'm a busy mom of two. I have my own profession. I have a studio. I want to I want to maximize the output in this amount of time. I want to hit my card. I want to hit every system.
Okay.
So I don't
Mm.
want to have to do practice yoga, which is what, people will do, and then feel like I have to go for a run because I didn't satisfy that cardiovascular need.
Hmm.
So my practice is very energizing. It mobilizes, it strengthens. Again, we practice a lot of like with plyo, but also getting on the hands and doing some inversions through handstands, not headstands. I would never teach those because when you get your hands down, you're immediately increasing your heart rate. So that's what I do. I do it pretty much every day. I also add on things like I do rucking for some extra
Hmm.
load through my spine for since I'm in menopause. I'm very interested in maintaining bone density.
Right.
And then I have the freedom because I do these practices so regularly. I can, go on, long hikes. We do hiking treks and things like that. But I could go for a run and feel fine because my body's primed for it, but I don't do it on a regular basis. Pretty much I practice my practice on a regular basis, adding weights in there 2 to 3 times a week.
So 2 to 3 times a week. For how long each session do you spend?
Personally, I like to go an hour to an hour and a half, but I'm also teaching, I'm living this, I'm creating this. So that might not fit into everybody's,
Right.
that they might not have that time, but this is also my lifestyle and it's my lifestyle and my profession. And so to me, I'm usually an hour to an hour and a half.
What about the neophyte that says, all right, I want to start integrating this. I want to learn about it once or twice a week to start out with? Is that going to be any benefit, or is
What
that
I
just not
say is,
an
again,
effective
dosage is
dose?
important. I'd rather
Yeah.
somebody do 3 to 4 times a week and take a 20-minute class. We
Okay.
have things from 9 minutes to 75 minutes and some hour
Okay.
and a half, master classes on there. Uh, so I would rather somebody say they play pickleball and then before they play pickleball or after they play pickleball, do like a 15-minute, 10-minute mobility session or a little flow that we have. We have we have all kinds of durations on there and levels. Levels meaning what are you looking for, not who you are. You're not a beginner or an advanced person. That's just the class that you're going to take. And the expectation is advanced is going to be more a little bit quicker, a lot of movement around the mat in different planes. Beginner is going to be slower, recognizing people are not yet mobile enough,
Right.
adaptable enough to move in all those variety of ways, and give you more time to to educate while you're putting it into practice. So I would rather somebody at least do 3 times a week and just do shorter clips of it.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Dosage is everything, right?
It's
In
everything. Yeah.
all things medicine.
Hmm.
Um, so you use a term that I don't think even I have a great understanding of. Would you explain plyometrics?
Yeah. Plyometrics is, I think it's actually a German word originally, and it's really basically we have muscular endurance, we have muscular strength, and then we have power. And power is so muscular strength is recruiting motor units,
Okay.
um, the amount you need to produce the force required in whatever movement you're doing with load.
Okay.
How quickly you summon those motor units is power. So
Right.
plyometrics is like, think of it as jumping jack, hop squat, anything that has a push off from the floor, that's power. How quickly you can summon those units together to produce the push off the power. So plyometrics, burpees are plyometrics.
Oh.
Anything again that. So
Wait. That word kind of just, I have PTSD from that word.
oh,
So,
yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
you can, I mean, I'm giving you that example. We don't necessarily do burpees in the way that you would think of them, but we do a lot of like we're squatting and we touch the ground and we hop up, like burst of energy from like pushing off. That's great for your heart rate. It's really great for all the soft tissue structures to have that kind of um, energy up through them. Obviously, great for your muscles. It's great for your breathing, and then practicing your form with that.
Right. Right. So the what is the concept? And you can answer this from your physical therapy world, or you can answer it from your yoga world, or both.
Hmm.
But if you have somebody that is just tight, right? Like I can't touch my toes. I mean, I can if I sit down and cross my legs, but can you take an individual and actually get them significant ranges of motion improvements?
Yes, I've seen it. Absolutely.
Okay. All
So
right.
when people are tight, there's lots of reasons for that. There is a genetic component. But even with a and just like there's a genetic component for people who are really loose, who are
Right. Like
flexible.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Right. And those are the
Right.
people actually that scare me more by
Okay.
far. I'll take a
Okay.
tight person over like a hypermobile person any day because hypermobility, they don't have enough proprioceptive input. So they're not getting any input. They're going into range, they're going beyond range. They've got perhaps in addition to that, like Ehlers-Danlos and all there's different hypermobility
Right.
syndrome. But they're soft tissue that there's laxity there. Whereas type people, they probably have increased responsiveness in their nervous system, and that can be like slowly that we can override some of that for sure. First of
Mhm.
all, teaching mobility is going to help with tightness. People will be tight, say, in their hamstrings, like you're
Right.
talking about.
Right.
Now, are their hamstrings actually tight, or is it you're not moving well in your hips and you're moving in your pelvis versus your hips because your back is tight?
Right.
So bending the knees and teaching people how to hip hinge versus tilted the pelvis and then feel that constant drag on their hamstrings is way more effective. We want some coil in our hamstrings. So if you never touch your toes with your knees straight, I could care less about that. Functionally, that's probably a good idea. But if you can't learn how to hip hinge well, that's a much bigger problem. So I would take you through mobility of your hips, mobility of your trunk, like how well is your thoracic spine moving?
Mhm.
Your tight hamstrings could be because they're tight to help stabilize things that are other areas aren't moving well, and so
Right.
it's to give some extra. So there's lots of reasons. So we get all through that. You could take a 15-minute class and hit enough areas that are going to impact your hamstrings without even just sitting on the ground and doing a hamstring stretch, which we never do, by the way. That's the worst way to stretch the hamstrings.
Wow. So how do you stretch the hamstrings? By getting everything else back in shape?
You do all that and you load your legs. You weight bear through your, so that getting back to that ground reaction force,
Right.
you need to have load on the leg that you're stretching. So whether you hinge and stretch it that way, you do it with one leg down, slide one leg behind you and hinge over that front leg, but you keep your feet loaded. Getting
Okay.
on the ground and doing like that fold, you're stretching your back, you're tipping your pelvis, you're not really hitting the hamstrings. And by the way, your hamstrings are probably tight feeling because your back is actually restricted.
And now, a message from our sponsor. Well, folks, if you are over 40 and you are not using a supplement to augment nitric oxide production, you should really rethink that. This molecule is absolutely imperative to the health of so many bodily functions, not the least of which is cardio protection. If you have any question on nitric oxide, I suggest that you register with Approved Medical Solutions and begin receiving their educational emails. I never miss a day of nitric oxide supplementation. That's how important it is. Long overdue, Approved Medical Solutions created the only nitric oxide replenishment formula without oxalates. Approved Medical Solutions does not use beet, spinach, or arginine. Approved Medical Solutions is proud to offer our audience their oxalate-free nitric oxide formula. If you are not a healthcare provider, you can still get started by going to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and use the code SBarrett at checkout, and you'll receive a 10% medical discount savings. You can register to receive educational emails without any purchase. For licensed practitioners, you too can go to approvedmedicalsolutions.com and get registered today. They have unique bundles for all of the full-fledged spelunkers of the Plot of Inquiry. Use Plot of Inquiry at checkout after registration. Here's a little secret. If you order their testing strips and test every patient for a few clinic days, you will see every one of them be deficient. When they see this result, they will want you to start them up immediately. Now, thanks to Approved Medical Solutions, you can give them the best care without the worry of oxalates. Well, I know that's the case in my situation. Yeah. I will tell you a story, though, and I think you'll find this interesting, and I swear to God, this is the truth. I was at a Pain Week meeting probably 15 years ago, and I don't know, maybe not that long ago, but a long time ago, and came across this technology called ArcWave. I don't know if you've ever heard of ArcWave, but it's some type of an electrical modality and a special wavelength and everything. And so the guy says, he said, yeah, this is great for patients and whatnot. I said, well, show me how it works. And he said, well, you stay in here at the hotel. And I said, yeah. He said, run up and get a pair of shorts, your running shorts. And I said, okay, great. So I put them on, went back down to the booth and at the meeting. And he said, all right, touch your toes. And I got maybe mid shin level, right? Tight hamstrings. And so he hooks me up and he runs this thing for about probably 5 minutes. And he says, okay, now touch your toes. And literally I went down and I could touch my toes. Never done that, you know? And he goes, no, touch them with the palms of your hands. And it's like, oh, I can't do that. He goes, try it. And I did it. And he said basically what he was doing with this frequency, he was disconnecting the autonomics that were firing down there and keeping everything into a contracted state. Now, the next day I could barely walk because, I had moved things that hadn't been moved in a long, long time. But I thought that was very interesting because I think it plays into what you're kind of saying with the, you have a motor response where it's more of a cognitive versus an autonomic proprioceptive response. So we know that, with proprioception, if you have people that are neuropathic, for example, they lose a lot of their proprioception. That's why they fall down and break their hips. But there's so much that's below the conscious level that I thought I was astounded by.
And I always say, like, when people say they're tight, I say, hey, we could put you under anesthesia for surgery and I could pull that leg up by your ear.
Right.
Because again, we've shut down that. And so what we do is we biohack that. We train the brain to pay less attention to that. And then it starts to feel safer. That's the other thing. So right. Nervous system safety means that you feel safe going into a range because, and that's that's why you want to prepare for it, prime for it, not just like biohack it with those things. Those are great to show you that,
Right.
but you want to prepare for it so that that has carryover. And so by mobilizing your hip well, by moving your rib cage well, some of that impulse that you're getting from the somatic nervous system is going to quiet down because you've created more balance overall. So there isn't that instinct to just guard.
Right. Well, I mean, range of motion is one thing because that's something that's pretty easy to measure even on your own individual level. So I think that's kind of a metric that people would
Yeah.
get. It's like, wow, okay, I've got definitely more range of motion. That's easy for a lot of people to, especially if they're restricted folks like myself.
Yeah.
It's easy to notice that. But I think with what you're doing from the, overall proprioceptive standpoint, and let's call it autonomic for lack of a better term, there's got to be significant benefits from proprioception and decreasing incidence of falls as
Absolutely.
and so that's a big deal.
Very big. I mean, I hear
Yeah.
that all the time. I've seen it myself. Oh, I slipped coming out of the shower. Oh, I tripped over this.
Right.
And the trip still happened, but the reflexive response was quick. The
Right.
the the coming back to equilibrium was quick. And that is the key because when
Right.
you fall and you don't have that, that's when, yeah, that's
Right.
when dangerous stuff happens. So, yeah, we're working on because you've just, when we do one-legged lots of one-legged balance stuff, yoga is known for that, but we also do it in a way that you're not hanging on any ligaments which aren't going to give you the same degree of that feedback. You're
Right.
really lighting up the muscles and the surrounding tissues to stabilize in that position so that everything from the toes to the ankle up into the leg and hip are getting that same like lighting being lit up. Like I always think of
Right.
that little highlight thing. And it's like in
Right.
your brain, it's like woo. And you practice that. You practice that, it gets you stronger. But like you said, it also really helps with balance overall and recorrecting if you do lose your balance, which we all are going to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things where you have to have still enough motor strength or muscle strength to be able to overcome some of these effects of gravity that are pulling you in the wrong direction, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
it goes into that. This is really fantastic. And then the other question I had for you is this has to be a benefit for pain management because of the mind body connection and, just getting somebody doing something that they haven't done before. It's huge.
Huge. I mean, outside of neurologically impaired clients, my biggest clients to this day are chronic pain. And the change in them is the most significant too.
Right.
Because really it's having a different relationship with your body's signals,
Right.
and it's very empowering to feel like, oh, I've always like avoided this because my low back or my shoulder, we have women who've gone through menopause and have frozen shoulder. And I have to tell them, like, I mean, it's a little different than chronic low back, but it's like they have to mobilize that
Mhm.
and their pain will subside. But the pain is um, like a hyper vigilant response, and low back is very similar. There just becomes a hyper vigilance, and so you just work with yourself to learn and teach your nervous system to learn that these are safe movements, they're good movements, they're nourishing movements,
Mhm.
and chronic pain is it really prevents people from moving, and in fact, they need
Yep.
to move more.
Right. Right.
But
It
they
pre-
need to know how to move, right?
right.
When we train, and that's again like what I saw was missing. If people are listening and they're like, "Oh, you teach yoga," well, the yoga is combined with that, but the yoga itself was missing the educational part of it.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of aspirational parts of yoga, but if you aren't giving somebody a trail map, it's very hard to reach the kind of pinnacle of what you want if you don't know how to, like, what does it mean to hold a neutral spine and a neutral pelvis and move your hips well.
Right.
That right there is going to help your low back tremendously. When you start unburdening it, unstraining it by moving in better ways, your brain catches up, and then it
Mhm.
starts to dial down that pain signal, because the pain signal is its only way of telling you, please change what you're doing. That's the
Right.
way you want to start thinking of pain. Even if you've been diagnosed with something, especially if you've been diagnosed with something. People, I just had somebody who I worked with yesterday. Oh, well, I have a, herniated disc here and this and that. And I'm like, I don't even want to know that. Like, to
Right.
me, that doesn't matter. And it might give you some comfort, because like, people want to know, like, if this is happening, this is the reason.
Right.
But the reason is, the root cause of it is the way that you're moving. And we change the root cause, and that'll help the herniation, but that'll also help the pain, and it'll help you overall, because now you're going to have the tools to move well, whether you're practicing with me or whether you're just moving in life.
Well, that brings me up to my next question. And if we kind of want to practice with you, we have that opportunity through your website, which, by the way, it's a beautiful website.
Thank you
And
so much.
um, and I think I'm going to give myself a challenge to work on my hamstrings and low back and follow your program for that. And I think, it. I think there's, at least for people like myself, that say, and you just brought this up. It's like, well, I've got this herniated disc, or I have a bad wrist arthritis, and I can't. There's no way I could do a plank, and some of these types of things. But there's ways that what you're saying to work around those issues. That
Yes,
that that
absolutely.
so that
Absolutely.
that doesn't have to preclude me because, oh, I've got horribly tight hamstrings. I can't do any of your stuff, right?
Right.
And that's what I think the important message is for people that are listening to this, is that this, no matter where you are on the spectrum of musculoskeletal health, there can be integration if it's done properly. Again, back to dosage. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, and I would say at any age, but especially after 40, you need to move more, and you need to have that quality of movement assurance in there.
Right. Right.
And so, yes, so go to the platform. I created this platform online after just traveling and being international and having workshops and retreats, and people wanting to practice with me. And then it really has spread beyond that. And you just get onto the site. It's called LYT Daily. Hopefully, you'll do it daily, or
Yeah.
some
Right.
classes in there. And there's a Start Here series. So if you're new to this, I would absolutely go there first.
Okay.
Start Here series looks a little bit more like prescriptive PT. It's like, here's the shoulder, mobility for the shoulder, stability for the shoulder, a little flow for the shoulder. And we have options on the floor, at the wall, and in a chair for kind of anyone. We were like, maybe this is people coming out of shoulder stuff.
Right.
If that feels like that's too remedial for you, just go to the launch pad, and we go through the education of it. Like, again, what is neutral spine and neutral pelvis? Why we do core work when we're doing it? What is a low bridge versus getting up in a big bridge? Like, we're doing all these things to retrain better movement habits.
Right.
And then you can just play around and look. There's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced toggle at the top. When you go take a class, if it's going too fast, there's a little speed thing. You can slow it down. So it can, or you can just pick another class. And please write me at any time with any questions. I love hearing from people and hearing, like, any questions they have or comments about how it's impacting them. And then for all the listeners, you have a special 5 weeks for $5 on coupon, which is called, it's the Move Better is the code. And you'll have the link in the show notes. And I would say, whenever you do go in and sign up, the payment page will show $40, and you will put in the code, and then it'll show $5. So
All right.
don't get off that page just because you see that. You have to enter the code to show the savings that you're getting.
All right, Laura, that my last question is, the website is Lit Daily, or is it?
The platform is LYT Daily. The website is lityoga.com. I
Okay.
will give you the link to
Okay.
get people directly onto the platform. They could go through the website to get there. It's also housed a little bit
Okay.
outside of that. So either through the lityoga.com home website, or going right to the platform website.
This has been super. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing this with you. I love exploration of topics that I know so little about, because it's like, wow, because we get these false perceptions in our heads, like, oh, I'm too tight to try this stuff, or I'm too old to do this, or my wrist hurts too much to do that, So this is fantastic stuff. And I think what you're doing is really great, because you're bringing it to people anywhere in the world.
Exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for having me. And I really want to hold you accountable to getting on there and working on your tight hamstrings.
Well,
Uh,
I'll tell you what I'm going to do.
yeah,
I'm going to make a commitment to you right now, and to
yeah,
our listeners, that I will start tomorrow with the very introductory stuff. And if I can make it for 30 days, that would be then it would be a habit. And then I will report back to you to say, hey, it worked for me. And I think it's just one of those things where you just got to get into routines and be comfortable with the integration. And I think that's what you've done here with your platforms, and your expertise as a physical therapist, I think, has a lot of merit, as well. Is that, you're not asking somebody to go into like a high level CrossFit or something and destroy them the first day, so they never want to do anything ever again. So I think
No,
that's
I want
awesome.
people to, we say, like, we want people to feel at home in their bodies.
Yeah.
This is the one thing, the longest relationship we're going to have in our lives
Right.
is right here in our body.
Yeah.
And it's a stranger to a lot of people because, one, we never learned about it. We weren't taught about muscles and bones and movement patterns. And that's why we feel a lot of fear when we feel tight or we feel pain, because we don't know the answer. And the answer actually is often that you just need to work with your body, and you need to learn about it. And we teach it in really simple ways. And it's exciting to learn about your body, to learn about these better movements that will
Mhm.
help you ultimately feel better in life.
Yeah, and not only feel better, but prevent, bad things from happening. That's
Yes,
an important thing too.
huge.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh my
huge.
goodness. Yeah.
All right, Laura Heimann, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight and expertise. It's been fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche. I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the Troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up, never experiencing the real benefits. I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works, they partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account, or go to the link above. I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find this a welcome goblet to sip from, or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show, if used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.